Welcome to the Misty Blue podcast. I'm Misti Green. This episode is part of the Beauty for Ashes Purpose in the Pain series. This episode is about loss, about what happens when life takes something from you that you never thought you'd have to live without. In this series, we have already talked about Leah and the ash of her rejection, and Joseph's ash of betrayal. In this episode, we're going to anchor our time in the story of Ruth, a widow, a foreigner, a woman who experienced grief, poverty, and displacement. Ruth buried her husband, walked away from her homeland, clinging to her mother-in-law with nothing but faith. Her life story begins in ashes, but through her faithfulness and resilience, God redeemed her. Ruth became part of the lineage that carried King David and ultimately Jesus Christ. Ruth's story shows us that loyalty in the ashes can lead to legacy in the beauty. What do you do when life as you knew it ends? When you lose someone you love, when your world crumbles, when your future feels completely erased and bleak? Loss has a way of emptying us. It strips us of stability. It shakes the ground beneath us to where we lose our footing. It makes us wonder if we'll ever feel whole again. That is ash, the ash of loss, grief, of uncertainty. See, Ruth knew that pain, but through her, God proved that loss is not the end. It can become the doorway to redemption. And that's the beauty. During our time, we're going to discuss how your loyalty in the ashes can open up the door to your legacy, how faithfulness in the small things positioned you for big redemption, and how God's provision often shows up disguised as people and opportunities. Please keep your eyes open for those people and opportunities. Please don't miss your blessing. Ruth's story begins with loss. She had married into an Israelite family who had moved to Moab during famine, but tragedy struck. First, Ruth lost her father-in-law. Then her husband and brother-in-law died as well. Ruth was left a widow in a foreign land. That is ash. The ash of grief, the ash of a life shattered far too soon, the ash of a future erased in one moment. Uncertainty set in. In the ancient world, widowhood carried deep vulnerability. Without a husband or sons, Ruth had no security, no protection, no provision. Her days would have been marked with fear of poverty and uncertainty. That is ash, the ash of insecurity and fear. Some of you listening know this ash. You've buried a spouse, a parent, or even a child, and the grief feels unbearable. You've lost a job or a career, and it feels like the ground has disappeared beneath your feet. You've endured divorce, and it feels like death of a different kind. Or maybe you've lost stability, financial, emotional, relational, and the insecurity leaves you anxious. That is ash, and when you're sitting in it, it feels like you'll never stand again. See, Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, decided to return to Bethlehem after hearing the famine had lifted. She urged both her daughter-in-laws to go back to their families. Oprah eventually left, but Ruth clung to Naomi. She declared the words that have echoed across history. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people and your God will be my God. See, that was loyalty. Ruth's loyalty was costly. By staying with Naomi, she left her own homeland, her culture, her safety net. She chose a road of uncertainty in a foreign land where she would be seen as an outsider. That is ash, the ash of displacement, the ash of being a stranger, the ash of walking away from what you know into the unknown. Many of us know this ash too, moving to a new city or country, leaving everything that's familiar to you, walking away from relationships that no longer serve their purpose, starting over after divorce or a job loss, or entering into a place where you just don't look like everyone else, where you don't sound like everyone else, and where you don't really feel like you belong. That is ash, the ash of feeling like an outsider. And when Ruth and Naomi arrived in Bethlehem, they had nothing. They were vulnerable. To survive, Ruth went to glean, to pick up leftover grain at the edges of the fields. It was hard. It was humbling work, but she was faithful. And it was in that place of humility that God positioned her for beauty. Boaz, the owner of the field, noticed her. He heard of her loyalty to Naomi, and he saw her work ethic, her humility, her courage. That is beauty, the beauty of being seen in your faithfulness, the beauty of God using ordinary fields to create extraordinary encounters. Boaz showed kindness, he showed protection, and even generosity. He provided food and instructed his workers to do what? To leave extra for Ruth. That is beauty, the beauty of provision in the place of poverty. Your field, quote unquote, your field might look different than Ruth's, but the principle is the same. Maybe your field is a job you don't love, but it keeps you afloat. Maybe your field is caring for children or parents while really feeling completely unseen. Maybe your field is starting small when your dreams feel so big. That may feel like ash, but God often uses those fields as the training ground for your destiny. And just like Ruth, you may be noticed right there, right in that field that feels so small. Naomi, seeing God's hand, guided Ruth to present herself to Boaz. Boaz stepped into the role of kinsman-redeemer, the one with the legal right to marry her and restore her future. Boaz married Ruth. He redeemed her from widowhood and from poverty. That is beauty, the beauty of redemption, the beauty of God using people to restore what was lost. And the story doesn't just end there. Ruth gave birth to Obed, the grandfather of David. From her line came Jesus. That is beauty. The beauty of legacy born from what? Born from loyalty. The beauty of God weaving redemption from the ashes of grief. 3 truths from Ruth's story. Your loyalty in the ashes can open the door to your legacy. See, Ruth lost her husband, her future, and her homeland. That's the ash. Her loyalty, though, it led her into the lineage of Christ. That's the beauty. Faithfulness in the small things positions you for big redemption. Ruth humbled herself to glean scraps in the field. That was her ash. But God used that field to introduce her and position her for Boaz. There's the beauty. And God's provision often shows up as what? As people. Ruth and Naomi were empty. They were vulnerable. That's the ash. But Boaz became the vessel of God's provision and redemption. There's the beauty. Maybe today you're sitting in Ruth's ashes. You've lost someone. You've lost stability. You've lost your sense of home and your footing. Isaiah 61:3 promises he will give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. Ruth's ashes were real. Grief, widowhood, uncertainty, loss, poverty, displacement. But God's beauty was greater. And he is the same God today. Ruth's life preaches this. Faithfulness in the ashes can lead to redemption in the beauty. Your loyalty, your consistency, your resilience, even in grief, can open doors you never imagined. If this episode encouraged you, share it with someone walking through grief or starting over. Remind them, ashes don't end the story. With God, they are the soil of beauty.